It's depressing.
It's depressing that it doesn't work.
No.
That is depressing.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, that's the agenda.
Yeah, you will come back to that, huh?
How it works.
No, it works.
Okay.
Good.
So I thought you should do the presentation of the agenda, so I didn't do that. But what you can see here is I'm going to head up the little introduction, and then we will have a NOMAD presentation from Søren, and we will have the MDMS presentation from Søren, and then we will hear from Katarina on the Austrian situation, on the Benelux and the TOMP, and then we will go into to three short panel debates that addresses standards, MDMS, and also what can we do from here. So that's like the big deal of today, and also the red thread. What is coming after this? So I'm sorry for the sound. I am Trond Hovland. I'm the acting manager of the NOMAD project. I've been that since the start. So since ITS Norway has been in lead of this project, we also kind of pulled most of the work within our organization. But all the Nordic ITS Association has been a part of the NOMAD project. We are approaching the end of this project now, and we are writing our kind of final report at the moment. And roaming is the kind of the name of the game in NOMAD, how to roam between countries, regions, and also between different modes of transport. And to do that, we are not going to solve it, but we are going to kind of find out under which circumstances, like regulation, standards, culture, PTA kind of regimes that are in place, demographics, will it work and how can it work? But that leaves a lot of questions open, and those questions will be kind of addressed today. And since we are a lot of experts here, and since we also are kind of still we need to do a lot of work, we have kind of initiated as the kind of the next natural step after NOMAD is finalized, to have a first European conclave. And I will come back to why we call it a conclave. But a conclave is something positive because it's like an end. You make a resolution in the conclave, and something new is coming out of it. So it's final, and it's also kind of a secret society. So you you can imagine that it's by invitation only. So you're here because you're probably good for being in the conclave. Okay, roaming. If you're happy with your taxi app in the city somewhere in the Nordics, you should use that taxi app to buy and trip with the bus in any other cities in the Nordics. That's the grand idea. Probably completely impossible, but it's in that direction we are moving ahead with the NOMAD project. Use your favorite app to buy a seamless and integrated journey anywhere in the Nordics. So that was the basic idea of it. We set out with all the Nordic associations in place. We had a capital region of Denmark, Arise in Sweden, TUI in Norway as the researchers, and then we used to have UBGO and Kitty as the industry partners. During the pandemic, they went bankrupt, so we couldn't go on with them. So no, that's why we have kind of crossed them out here in this slide. It is a 3-year project, but now we are kind of in 1 week we will be more than 5 years old. So it has taken quite a time. So this is now the logos of all the companies that are in the project, and this is also the work package distribution. We are now in the end of work package 5, which is wrapping this up. The history of NOMAD, we started in 2018. We had 2 pre-projects actually testing the grounds for NOMAD. We looked at the data provision across the Nordics. It was in place. We looked at the roaming possibility. It was in place. So we kind of merged the 2 pre-projects into one main project, which is NOMAD, and we kicked off. During the COVID, we were postponed for more than a year. That means that we also stopped working with end users the kind of the travelers that was involved, because we couldn't do that during COVID. We could also not travel across borders due to the restrictions. Finally, this also kind of made our industry partners bankrupt. So we changed the project into scenario simulations. That means that we didn't do anything in practice, but we simulated everything that was planned in the initial phase of the project. So now we are here. We have the first European conclave. We have had a lot of meetings in this hotel so far, and we will continue to have at least one more dissemination workshop in Norway. That is kind of for the project, the internal part of the project, and then eventually we will send the report. Hopefully, we will do that before December, and also with the kind of initiative to new project. But we are not alone, and there has been a lot of things going on in the world in parallel to the NOMAD project, and we are well aware of that. We have all the EU regulations. We have also the MaaS Alliance that has been working its course. We have had the national access point developing, and also in Norway we have EN2 kind of growing steadily from almost nothing to what it is today, and powerful unit for data distribution in Norway. We have the MaaS project in Austria and Benelux. We have had a lot of pilots, a lot of operations. Some of them have been successful, but I think many of them also fails to address what is the real barriers of MaaS, and that's why we haven't succeeded yet. For our part, after the NOMAD project is stopped, we will kind of go on to use the platform of the Nordic Plus. Nordic Plus is a combination of all the ITS association in the Nordics, but also in Estonia, and it's open to other ITS associations, so that if you want to send an application, Donald, it will be rapidly kind of granted. Yeah, so just a hint. Yeah. So that makes the platform to kind of continue our work. And Jenny is heading up a project that actually builds this into an organization as well. So when we have all these kind of resources, we have all this experience, all these learning points from the history. We have the NOMAD going into to the Nordic. We have the first conclave that is here, and maybe we need some smaller conclaves, I don't know. But eventually, we need to do something together to kind of fix it. And that's where the conclave kind of come into play. You know, when the cardinals go into the Sixtine Chapel, they have to come out with a solution. And when we were in Hamburg, the ITS World Congress in Hamburg, we had a MaaS meeting. There were more people in the panel than in the audience. But still, we agreed that with one crate of beer each, and a room like the Sistine Chapel, we should solve it. So then we kind of agreed to kind of set up the conclave. And Martin Russ was one of the guys who promoted. He asked if he could have, can I have wine instead of beer? But that was the question. So now we have Katarina here, and so hopefully we can have a couple of more kind of projects, and then let out the white smoke that we actually make MaaS work for the future, because that's the only way to make the transportation green again. So that was my introduction, and I'm really happy to introduce you to Søren, who will pull the next two presentations. You can give him a hand, yeah.
I think that hand was more for Trond, or if you don't think that's true, then give Trond a hand. Okay, so my name is Søren Sørensen, and I've been part of the NOMAD program, and I have a background in ticketing. I was part of making the national ticketing system here in Denmark. So in Denmark, we indeed have MaaS for public transport. We can go from any station to any station, any bus stop to any station in Denmark on one ticket and see it in one plan. So we are multimodal in Denmark, unfortunately, for public transport only. So, but at least it gives an idea of that it's technically possible, and why not also across borders. So let's see. We have had the introduction on what NOMAD is, so I don't want to spend that. I just wanted to tell you why you're in Copenhagen. We're part of the Nordic countries, and why should the others look to the Nordics? That's because we are a good digital test bench. Because I think if you look on digital economy, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden and Finland are on the front here on the digital economy society index from the EU. Norway is of course not here, but that's only because you're not a member of the EU. But indeed, you would be here if not. Same for innovation scoreboard. Denmark, Finland, and Sweden are on the top. So there is something brewing in the Nordics, and that's why we also are inviting everybody, and also why we have Nordic Plus. We are inviting everybody to come and be part of that brewing process, and then feel free to take some with you home and try to make some good beer or wine or whatever that you do there transport wise. But just to mention that there's something to come for here. We don't use cash, for instance. Why this Nordic? I mean, this program was funded by the Nordic Innovation, and that's because the nations here in the Nordics have a body that is coordinating policies that has Nordic general value. And the ministers in the Nordics, when they come together, they have then decided that they want to create the most sustainable and integrated region in the world, just to be a little bit modest. And they will do that by 2030, and they have three dimensions there. A green Nordic region, and that is to go towards carbon neutrality and sustainable, circular, and bio-based economy. Transport comes into play here because we have to make sure that you can get around using sustainable modes of transport. And therefore, we have to make it easy to find and use those services today, and especially for long distance train and electric bus and whatnot services. And that's where the NOMAD program can deliver. Then a competitive Nordic region, that is to get the green growth going in the Nordic region based on the innovation and the mobility and digital integration. And there again, we need to be able to get people to roam freely in the Nordics so that they can do all what needs to be done so that we can create good stuff and also, of course, export it to the rest of the world, both knowledge, but also products and the strategies. And then a socially sustainable Nordic region, that is to make sure that it's an inclusive and equal opportunities, and also that we interconnected. That basically means that you should not be lesser fortunate and in getting around if you do not have a car, for instance. So it also means that that we should not leave anyone behind. We should be able to move freely around, and thereby get the fullest out of us, each individual. So that's the vision in which we have to live, and that's also where the NOMAD program has tried to deliver. So the NOMAD vision is to see if we can get air travelers and car users, private car users, transformed a bit over to use more multimodal ground and sea options to get around, both for short and long distance trips in and between the Nordic countries. And the concept that we're trying to do there, that what we're putting to the test, is the borderless multimodal trip planning, booking, payment, and navigation through MaaS agents, as we call them. and using MaaS roaming. The roaming thing is something, I mean, I guess you have your smartphone with you, and you don't even think about that, you can actually talk to everybody in the world on that smartphone. Of course you can. Why can you? Because it's made possible for you. Because we have roaming agreements, because all the different actors around in the world has come together and made that possible. Without that, you'd be in trouble and you have to go to a booth here at the hotel and ask for a long distance call to Sweden or to Holland or to Austria. That was the reality just 10 years ago. It's still the reality for public transport. That's easy. The objective, of course, is to reduce CO2 emissions. We are spending too much on flying, and it creates too much emission. And the private car is by far the biggest contributor to CO2 emissions within transport, the private car. And it will be that for the next 30 years. Okay, so I think one of the best experience we've had in the program was a pain experience. I have a pain in my shoulder and neck today, if I look a little bit strange, but here we tried a different pain. Actually, we wanted to do something nice. We would like to bring a couple from Jönköping to Skagen for a weekend getaway. And they just wanted to use public transport because they have seen there was a train station in Skagen and they have a train station in Jönköping. What's the problem? So, and they just want to be in Skagen for a weekend. And we just asked, and we had experts in the room. We asked them, could you just please make a travel plan for those guys? The first thing first thing you do is you look in Google Maps. Google Maps tells you that you have to go all the way down to Copenhagen, cross the bridge, and go up to Skagen. That's an 11-hour ride. And that would cost you this, and of course, 4 operators and 4 tickets. You took your car. Google Maps would tell you, of course, there's a ferry. You can take that with your car, and then you can get to Skagen, and you'll get that much faster and for less price if you are 2, I guess. Yeah. If you are 2, that would actually be cheaper if you do not take the cost of that, right? Of the car in it. But the true multimodal MaaS journey, and here I just have to cut and paste because that's not available today, is of course that you have one travel plan, you have one ticket, and you have one price. And if I take the train to Gothenburg, I take a bus to the ferry, I take the ferry, and I take the train here. That's actually 4 tickets. But if I now have them in one combined ticket, that was valid everywhere, and I paid it in one price, and since I'm from Sweden, I will of course pay that in Swedish krona, even though that this one is a Danish krona fare. Then I would have a single picture of what it is, just as a GPS in the car, and I could just go. And of course, the good MaaS agent would help me on the ways if something went wrong. Like Edwin, yesterday had a very similar experience coming to Copenhagen from Netherlands. No, where we come? Netherlands, yeah. This is what we're aiming for, to make it just as easy as it was to use the car. How, by the way, for those who was not here, how long time would you think it would take you in your car to make this travel plan? Seconds? Yeah, within a minute, something, and then you might want to reserve a place on the ferry for your car. But that's it. For the experts in the room, it took between 4 to 7 apps to find and pay for the Skagen trip. 4 different purchases. Time to plan. We stopped the exercise at 45 minutes. There were very few of the groups who would actually want to embark on that trip they have found because they were not really sure it was the best one. They were not really sure if they could make it. They had no clue. We also learned that even Google Map cannot see a ferry that can carry persons, not cars. Car trips was considered much easier by the experts in the room. And couldn't they just borrow a car or something, or get something to set somebody to drive them at least to the ferry? So we are making it too complex to use public transport or smart mobility options as soon as we get out of our local region. That's a big issue. What we're trying to do in the NOMAD program is to demonstrate that it is possible to actually do multimodal travel plans within and across the national borders. I don't like that. Mean that we could end up without a presentation soon. So what we have tried to do is to set up a scene where we see that we have some entities that could become true MaaS agencies. Here in Denmark, of course, Iceport, Iceplane. In Norway, Entur is on the way. Entur is following the transmodal concept, so that's good. We have Racerobot, which is also kind of national scope in Sweden. We have Travis as a private operator in Stockholm. It's only Stockholm, isn't it? They're not moved to. Only Stockholm. Yeah. In Finland, we of course have WIM, and I think we have another actor coming up in Finland also, a MaaS actor, but definitely WIM. So we have public actors and we have private actors. But of course, we want them to be able to collaborate no matter how they're funded. So the idea is also, as Conclave mentioned here, is that if I want to make a trip, I can use my Rejseplan app, and then I can make a trip to Norway, and I can also order a scooter in Norway using my own app, like I'm using my own phone. And Rejseplan and Entur figures out behind the scene. I don't have to worry about that. But I get to get that deal like it was home. So we're trying to do Rome like home. So we also have discussed what it would take to come to that scenario. And we put that into the groups, and you can see the results in the report when it comes out, what the learnings were from that. But here we have said that in 2029, maybe a little bit optimistic, there are at least 4 national regional MaaS players in the Nordics, at least one in each country. And they show all actors that have data in the national access point. The national access points are the places where we collect all open mobility data. And in the future, we hopefully have the multimodal digital mobility service regulation that is basically just to create a level playing field for all parties to allow for third-party selling of their services, mobility services. And thereby we can get this MaaS roaming and the Roam like home. So you can plan and book and pay for mobility service for any journey in and between Nordic countries using your home app. That's the ambition. From the end user point of view, that's what he sees. How to get to there? small, easy steps. First, we have to populate the national access point that's going on this year. So that's actually happening. In that, when we've done that, then we can do planning, prices, and navigation. Then we have to open up for booking and payment. And there we hope that the multimodal digital mobility services regulation will create that foundation whenever it comes, that we can then put to the test and say, this is the way that we do it in Denmark when we're doing third-party ticketing and booking, third-party booking of a car share. This is how we do it in N2. We do it the same way. Doing it the same way nationally also means that we could do it the same way internationally. If we do not do it the same way nationally, forget about international, because it will become too cumbersome that anyone will want to spend money on that situation. So now we have solved the national, so that I can now travel nationally from any bus stop to any station. I can get a car share, I can get a e-scooter, I can get a bicycle. I can figure out whether I can get carpooling to my destination instead of taking public transport, or if there is no public transport available to that place. So that's a big step. Next is we need the cross-border ferries in the picture. We need to have them as an integral part of the whole setup, so that we can also get across. Cross-border ferries are very important in the Nordics, maybe more important than in the middle of Europe, because it's basically the only way from Sweden and Norway and Finland to get to mainland Europe through the gateway Denmark. So we just happen to be there. You can also take the trip to Estonia and then get that way down if you like. But this one I think has better roads and tracks. Then we need the multimodal travel options and optimization, and that's the tricky one. But there we have had good help and input from the Odin team, which is a group of Nordic national access point actors and associated partners. And they have actually figured out that it is possible in one travel plan to get a routing from anywhere to anywhere in the Nordics. You can actually do that using the data that is already available. And I hope Brede is nodding. Yeah, he's nodding. Okay, good. So in principle, that's kind of done. We just have to figure out how to do it so that if all those players here can get access to that big routing thing, so that they can make those optimal routing suggestions for the trip that you're seeking, like the GPS in your car. It's basically the multimodal GPS we have here. And then we are missing, the only thing that we're then missing is the roaming agreements between Denmark and that could be Alpine and N2, under which rules and conditions will N2 help a Reiseplan user to get a trip into Norway or make a trip in Norway. That's the mission there. And that means that if I'm in Finland, I have the Whip app, then I can actually make a trip in my Whip app to Copenhagen. I can go to I think it's Trondheim around there in Trondheim, and I really need a scooter share. I can do that also using that. And then I'm taking the train down to Oslo, and there I need a car share because I want to roam out in the wilderness. There's a lot of wilderness in Norway.
Yes.
Søren?
Yeah, I also have some discussions whether we should. You have now mentioned the cross-border ferries, but I think also for the future, of course, the airline companies, they will be interested in this. Because then they can also do a door-to-door service for their customers. But
Yeah.
of course, this is an open system.
Yeah.
On this project, we decided that we would focus on this, but because if you are traveling to Bornholm, for example, the ferry is not really green. So actually flying there is more green than going by the ferry. So I think it will be at some point also interested, of course, of having a system where you can easily access the train from Oslo airport to the street.
Yeah. I just have one, Jenny.
Yeah, because I'm not sure if the sound.
Could you ask them?
Yes, I will.
Ask them we're just asking the web participant whether you can hear what was said, and it was from Søren Bom from the capital region. We'll figure out if they can hear it. And Brede,
Yes.
they can.
Robert said yes.
Okay.
Robert is
So
switched on.
but they can't see you. So if you are saying something, please just say your name and then your comment. And Brede is now coming into the picture.
We like that activity.
A little bit about how we do it in the Odin project. We have a proof of concept there. We are using the data from the national access points, nettext from Norway and Sweden, GTFS at the moment from Finland and Denmark, feed it into one joint trip planner. It's a proof of concept. We can't use it in production today because there are some lack in data quality. We are missing the international ferries. We have access to nettext data for all flights. We can just turn it on. We did that in the Entour app once. Maybe Hannah remembers. We got a lot of complaints. Why is each of small airports in Europe first in geocoder when they're typing in stations in a Norwegian app? Like, it's not what we should make easier available than it is. It's all the other transport. So the problem today is in the data for planning, international rail, and cross-border ferries data context.
Yeah, but I think that the ferry here is in public transport, isn't it?
Yeah,
Or
the ferry between Denmark, Sweden, and Finland.
Yeah,
they are in the Finnish data set.
Yeah. So that's why we could make a trip from Finland to Copenhagen easily, or to Denmark, actually multimodal.
Yeah, you
that.
can go from Bergen to some place in Helsinki or Finland.
Yeah,
that's very nice.
You must stay, Bergen.
But not to Denmark.
Thanks, Brede. And Brede Dammen, if people don't know him, is from Entour in Norway. Good.
One question.
Yeah.
Should we have some kind of clearing system if you think that we have a kind of a mobility service agent that is selling one ticket for 4 different modes? And I'm almost sure that it would like to sell that ticket a bit cheaper, kind of packet price. And after that, share that money to those 4 different operators. So should we have some kind of clearing office?
Yeah. That's actually in the roaming agreements.
Okay.
Because and there, I think the package deal we have not really discussed, but of course that's an option. Here we are basically assuming that each national partner knows the price models available for the national tickets or the national mobility service, car shares and whatnot. So the only thing that you're getting through the roaming is access to all that. It also means that each, for instance, a car share company does not need to be connected to all the MaaS players in the Nordics. It basically just needs to be connected to the one in your home territory. And then everybody else can get access to those services through the roaming. But of course, you could also But then we come into kind of, you need some kind of a repository where you have those special deals like you have in the airline industry, that you can go in and see that I now have a special deal for that multimodal trip, where there are some partners, alliances that are coming together and doing special deals. But I think that's a step even further out. Here we're just trying to get connection so that you can do the same thing using digital means as you can individual in the physical world, or individual by going into 4 to 7 apps. But yeah, did that answer? Okay. So, but the whole thing is based on how do we do it? I think the only thing that we can see is that we have to be very strict on using same standards. Don't even think about moving to something else, because if you do that, we're getting back to the system that we have today, no intercommunication. National access points, the multimodal regulated service for multimodal planning, booking, and navigation, and then MDMS, the regulation that allows MaaS agency to exist. Today, there is no chance for MaaS agent to exist on any commercial conditions. And the MaaS roaming governance. Here is my home MaaS, that could be Denmark. Here is my visiting MaaS, that could be Finland. Here is my MaaS A user he can, of course, travel free in Denmark. And then he moves into the Finnish territory. And then if he has a trip between there and there, that's a roaming trip, because it needs some information from the visiting MaaS domain, because there are some mobility services over there that you need to buy as well. That is handled through the roaming agreement. The clearing makes sure that the services that are bought up here in euro in Finland are cleared so that they are paid by the Danish user in Danish kroner. So something is also handled about how do we do exchange rates and some things like that. Make it as easy as possible for the end user, adding complexity here behind the scene. And then you can plan, book, pay, and navigate throughout the Nordics, as you can do. Oh, easy set. This is another way to illustrate it. As it is today, you can basically only roam freely within your local domain. In Denmark, it's a national. You can do it. In Sweden, you have to do something different as soon as you move into a different region. I guess it's so in Finland and maybe somewhat in Norway also, until Entur has full control. But by having a MaaS app that takes care of, if this was Denmark, then this could maybe be Sweden. And then we have a nice region here, the Greater Copenhagen region, which is visible to both Sweden and Denmark. Then you have the MaaS roaming trips here. You have the MaaS roaming trips from Denmark in Sweden here. So I could take a trip from Gothenburg to Stockholm using my Reiseplan app. The conclusion. I would claim, and the NOMAD program would claim, and nobody in the experts that have been in there has said it's not possible, that there is a possible path to get to this setup if we want to. Also that we do, provided that this multimodal digital mobility service actually implements what it's supposed to implement, then we actually have the foundation also for the governance model from the payment of those extra services, because that's of course some cost associated with that. And then we think that roaming, a roaming-like cooperation between neighboring MaaS domain using same standards are feasible. It is possible. Issues outstanding. And that's something that kind of leads into maybe this afternoon's discussion. It sort of leads into what we think could be next step for pursuing this integration. That is, of course, does it matter? Will MaaS roaming create more user shared mobility services? If we make it easier, would that couple go to Skagen using a train? That's a litmus test. And also, will travelers recognize the benefit of it? And then we have to put the NDMS regulation when it comes eventually under test. And we could be, since with this, the status that we have in the Nordics, we could be one of the test benches where we actually do it fast and try to make some of the put ourselves up for that challenge. This is the biggest one. What is a fair business model for MaaS roaming? Without having that solved, it will not happen. I mean, nobody works for free for a long time. Then, of course, we are now assuming that if we just get MaaS roaming and people then it'll be much easier to, for instance, do cross-border commuting, which is kind of a big thing in the Nordics. One of the biggest cross-border places is almost next door. It's the bridge to Sweden. We have a lot of going back and forth between Denmark and Sweden. There's a lot between Norway and Sweden as well. And we have all kinds of evidence that people are struggling with getting tickets, getting ways to get across those borders. They have to figure it out themselves, basically. Then, of course, what needs to be in a roaming agreement? This comes back to the question on, could we do special deals? Yeah, this one is related to where should the takeover point between two MaaS domains, between, for instance, Denmark and Norway? We have several ferry connections. And how to simplify cross-border multimodal ticketing and validation. I think my time is running out for this one part.
For this part, it's run out, but I thought you were going on your next.
Yeah.
I said you are the next, so you are like floating into the one. I could introduce you again.
Who's this guy?
I'm just on finding the cross-border point, and then I'll get into NDMS. Is basically, for instance, if you want to go to Aalborg from Oslo, you actually have three ferry crossings at least, and a bridge crossing. Which one to choose? And that's where Brede's multinational route optimization thing comes into play. Now we should not again. So because you cannot just define a handover point. That's what is, if you look in the MMTI's regulation, there's just stated that two parties define a handover point, but where is it? So that needs to be figured out before we're done. The other thing is, I think there's a need for a unified ticket ID. As it is now, if I'm going the three modes, that could be the trip again, the train, the bus, the train. I have a dedicated ticket here, another dedicated ticket here with another dedicated inspection, and a third dedicated ticket and inspection here. What I should have is I should have one identifier and have kind of a cloud-based ticket, like you have in the IATA world, that you have a universal ticket ID. And that means that I can present the same ticket on the train to Gothenburg, on the bus in Gothenburg, and on the train to Skagen. And the inspection will at least have an API that can read and validate that to a global, kind of semi-global service. That's the way you can do it using the means we have today. Then you can, of course, go into all kinds of future scenarios, but this one is a workable thing. This is basically also how we do it in Denmark on a national scale. Next. Yeah.
We need those MaaS agent handover points. Can you clarify what's the purpose of them?
The handover points define which part of the now take back.
Okay, I can try to explain.
Yeah, you can do it.
This slide, yeah. Never mind.
Which one?
Go backwards.
That's that's also something we are talking about. I mentioned how we do it in Odin today. The linking apps is using Open Journey Planner API to link. So we can use that as well to link the Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish trip planners together. Then you have to define all the points to where should we change. The technology has gone far today, so we handle huge data sets in one trip planner today. So in the Nordics, we believe more in integrating the data into one, then you don't need to handle the interchange points between the borders. I travel between Oslo and Bergen has 1.6 million different ways of travel. And to find the interchange points is something that we want to do. We have algorithms handling that for us. But in a European context, the graph for one trip planner will be too big. So there we can use Open Journey Planner to link the Nordic into the German and further into the linking apps solutions to travel through Europe and bigger regions.
One thing is planning, the other one is buying the tickets for
Yeah.
the services.
And what we plan in the Nordic, when we find a travel here, Oslo, and we have to decide who is selling the cross-border part. Only one party should do that, and we should use their API to sell that tickets. Today, every country is trying to develop that into our systems, resulting in different prices, oversold services that are running almost empty because we believe it's fully sold. So that's something we know who is the owner of the line, and we can call that sales API for the prices and do the sales. Yeah, that's our plan in the Nordic. Yeah.
I have a question here, Søren, again, from the region of Denmark. One of the things here in Denmark is that in the law says that we cannot put commission on the tickets that are sold by a third party. But I mean, could it be discussed whether the service that we're putting together, this MaaS, roaming MaaS system, that could be commissioned on that part? But still, you will be seeing that if you go in depth and say, what did I really pay for? You'll still say, yeah, I paid for the trip. that was the same price as I can find in the Danish country-based MaaS solution, but I also pay a commission because somebody actually developed this MaaS solution for me. So the price that you will see traveling here, and of course, if you're not roaming or if you don't want to use it, they can direct you to say you can get a cheaper ticket if you go to the local Danish MaaS provider. But I mean, I think sometimes it stops discussions here in Denmark with the trade public transport agencies that no, we were selling our tickets commission.
Yeah.
I really think that there should be a discussion also what are the commissions for.
Yeah, it's important, and it's a problem already today, and the systems that's tried to do this today. But I think we should address those questions into the MDMS regulation. Try to get something from the top down. So I think it's running out of time for.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah. So how much time do I have for MDMS? 5? No, how much?
15 minutes. 5 minutes. You should give it.
That was because of later. I mean, he's.
Oh, you blame someone else now.
So the next presentation I'm making as mostly as myself as a consultant, because it's kind of just some ideas and inputs to something that we really don't know much about, the MDMS regulation. Just shortly, the biggest issue I think we have, if I look broader perspective more than public transport, is that all the travel planners that we have today is one-way travel planners. And that means that the only thing I'll see if I go from Copenhagen to Aarhus is I can go there 2 times an hour in a train, period, if I'm not using my private car. But there are many other options. They will come forward if I'm also having to say I'm returning at that time. Maybe I'm over there for a week and I'm coming back at 8 o'clock Sunday night. And there I have bus, ride share, car share. I have here the train again, and there are also bus services, ride shares, and car shares. So I have a lot of more services. They are out there today. You can use them, but you can't see them. Of course, you can see them if you go into each and individual app, but then we're back to this app nightmare thing again. And here, just very short, that train trip to Aarhus, return trip costs 980 kroner. And if I'm 2 people, it's double up. If I'm 3, it's triple. If I'm 4. And then using a car, it could be my own car. It could be car shares. Here I have both Kinto, Let's Go. I have Share Now and Green Mobility. I just took the prices and then I compared it to train. The train wins over all cars for 1 and almost 2 persons traveling together. When you come up to 4 people in the car, it wins over public transport. That's why if your family is going for a weekend, take a car. Of course, you also have a lot of stuff. But if you're only one traveling, take the train. Funny enough, the occupancy in cars is around a little bit over 1. So people haven't figured that one out yet. The funny thing here is the cheapest way actually to get to Aarhus is carpooling or a private bus, Flixbus or other bus operators. They beat prices almost down to a third of what public transport is doing. Could that be the reason why public transport don't want to show all the modalities in one picture? But this is actually how I'm doing my calculation, because I don't own a car. I'm using mobility as a service. I'm using a car when I need it. I'm taking the train when that fits, especially if I'm traveling alone and not have a lot of luggage. This is how the users are, but we are always talking about how it is for the operators. So here again, I would, again, as Marcos always says, what about the users? This is what the users see. Long distance bus and ride, always best price. 4 people in a car, always better than a train, at least in Denmark. E-car share is also a funny thing here. It's cheaper to use than a fossil fuel car for a trip to Aarhus. And just for the fun of it, there are 2 tolls involved. Either you have to take a ferry or you have to take a bridge with toll bridge. So just to say that multimodal travel planning is not necessarily multimodal in one chain. It could be multimodal per journey.
Sorry, for interrupting again.
Yeah.
But I also think it's interesting to see here that we actually are, because then for convenience, if you're not entering the center of Aarhus or the center of Copenhagen or where the bus stop are, then you will still use your car. So I think you also are missing out the first last mile trip that you can actually make. Let's say that you could, if I'm going to Hvidovre instead, then I could easily hop on a donkey bike or a tier bike or an Aarhus, I don't know what schemes they have, but
yeah,
because you don't see them. So you will still say, oh, but I'm not going to the center of Aarhus, so I'm still taking my car. So you're still missing some of the trips that could be made. Because, okay, you can easily take the bus, it's the cheapest one. But of course, you can also easily access kind of a car if that's what you need, or if you go to a summer house or something like that, but locally, instead of going all the way.
Yeah, but here's what I was trying to see is that we can add a lot of extra information to the end user from, and now I've taken my origin was Copenhagen Central Station, and my destination was Aarhus Airport, Aarhus Central Station. Of course, you can do any other combination, and then you will see a different results here, different prices, but you will also see different times. The funny thing here is that it takes approximately the same time to go between those 2 destinations, no matter what you take. So I'm just saying that we are making a whole range of mobility options invisible to the users. And that was what MDMS is here for, to change that. What did you do, Jenny?
Your 5 minutes are over.
So I just want to say here in my 0 minutes, the MDMS is about accelerating the shift to sustainable and smart mobility. It's part of the EU Green Deal. So EU basically had to deliver on this one. And they want to have seamless multimodal transport based on digital solutions. This is what we are trying to achieve. And they have delivered the multimodal the MMTIS regulation means that we now know what we have of options out there very soon, at least. The next thing is then the MDMS, the upcoming regulation. And the whole idea there is to make it a level playing field for all actors to be part of that, also the MaaS actors, so that they can collect and provide and sell mobility services on behalf of the primary actor, or on behalf of me, be my agent. Being my agent, not being a city's social goals or whatever. It's my choice which mobility option I want to use. This is the MaaS agent's option. The biggest problem is that there's a lack of willingness to operate. Right now in Brussels, there's a lot of opposition against the MDMS regulation. Public transport companies want to leave us alone. Don't even think about making it easier to use us broadly. We're fine. But here, the objective of that regulation is to allow the reselling and integration of all mobility options by tackling the commercial and technical challenges, and especially the fair competition principles. And I think here, and I'll end with this one, the biggest thing here is what they have put forward is the FRAND principles. The FRAND principle is basically, it's the same as in public transport. If you want to have a private bus actor to deliver your bus services, then you put out a tender, but you cannot slash the prices that he is coming forward with so much that he cannot have a return on his investment. So this is again that the primary actors would have to be as a third party is selling their services. That means they're not selling that service themselves. That means that cost of selling that service should go to the third party. And that's basically the big issue. That's where every discussion stops when we're talking it from a free world. And that's why we need this big brother coming in and say, guess what? This is how it's going to be. And I'll end it here. Question.
Perry from Rice. How do you see this relate? So there is another parallel initiative from EU, from Digital Europe, which is the European Mobility Data Spaces. And one of those is the data European Mobility Data Space, and one of them is the Mobility Data Space.
Yeah.
And there's a big project now launching to test this, and RISE is part of that. But that is addressing the same area from a different perspective. That's the infrastructure, but there will also be roaming handovers and those things. And we have the GG Move initiative, and they are not colliding, but they are sort of initiated in parallel and not with the great coordination, I would say.
I think it's one of the greatest questions for the panel this afternoon. It's
from the good, yeah.
So I think that will be dealt with. You can, it's a cliffhanger. Is that okay? Yeah.
And then there's kind of a comment as well from on the chat saying another aspect is after sales and passenger rights topics in distributed ticketing for cross-border journeys, which is currently unsolved, right?
Yeah, and this is part of the MDNS as well, because this is part of them, what they are doing and what they have the policy option is to integrate this on the multimodal journey, the passenger rights. So this is an integral part of MDNS if it comes.
Okay. Okay, I don't know if someone will touch upon that, but anyway, I will thank you. Applause to Søren. Here's another comment saying that slide 48 is very interesting. The cost by mode comparison is understood, but the range of cost by party size and indeed how people want to use travel time are very important. For travels.
Yeah, you want to have your hands locked to a wheel doing for the duration, or you want to spend your time freely in the train. Yeah.
And we will for your information also online, we will share the presentations in PDF format afterwards as well. So that's the thing. I forgot to tell my name. I was so eager to jump straight into the presentation. My name is Jenny Simonsen. ITS Norway. So I've done that now, at least for the record. Edwin, I will give the floor to you. So big applause for Edwin.
Thank you all. I think I have to make it in 23 minutes, so because I don't want to spoil coffee break. I have a lot of things I want to address, but I'm not going to into depth of most of them. If you're interested in one of these areas, you can contact me later on. First of all, I have to place each of these things in the European context, and then I'll put them on the right spot. The context itself, this picture should be known by most people, especially people from Paris. The 5 letters MaaS, and we can relate it, for instance, to the European legislation and where everything is in. For the ones who don't know, no integration, no data sharing, no possibility anyhow to travel cross-border because no data is shared. This one is level 1, and that's where we actually mostly reside in most European countries, where the national access points are actually established for getting all the static data where you can plan on and price information. Secondly, it's the sharing services, not anymore sharing data, but sharing services. And the topmost two are more related about how we're going to sell it, what's the price model, all the discussions we have now, but they're formally put into place in this model. Behind it, I got a nice image from Etigo, and I'm going to connect both things, and after that I'm going into depth about standards. Behind this part, there are all kinds of public and non-public transport operators, cities, municipalities over there, and this arrow is going from the operators to the cities to control, to analyze if they're doing the right thing. Secondly, the transport operators need to deliver data to the national access points, and that's actually more or less really solved in the MMTIS regulation, and that's all in level 1. Level 2 is more about MDMS, how we're going to exchange services. And maybe not the opinion, not commonly shared, but if I look at the current situation, it's more aiming for long distance train than to MaaS. So I'm not really happy what's going on in MDMS right now, but that's my opinion. But that's how we can put these things into place. And now I'm going to the technical part. If you look at most of the existing standards, we nowadays consume in Entour, but also in OGP and all kinds of travel journey planners, is about static data. And that's more or less covered in this one, but there are numerous ones, but there are silent ones. And I think attempts where you can combine these things together, what's the purpose? Because they're made for a purpose within their silo. As long as the journey planners know how to consume it and to use it, it's fine. The second level, where NDMS is coming into play, there are only, I think, 3 open standards right now: the BOB, the OSDM, and the TOMP API. This is the technical part, but now let's focus on the end user, because the end user is the one we're going to serve. He needs somehow a trip plan. OGP, OTP, I don't know. It's fed by the data from the transport operators and is regulated by the MMTIS. And I don't know if it's a direct tight coupling between a trip planner and a MaaS service provider, but in the Netherlands, we're thinking nowadays about establishing a journey planner should be or MaaS service provider, so there's no tight. Trip planners should be in national hands to facilitate the green perspective. So that's we call it the STOMP principle: walking, bicycling, public transport, micromobility modes, and private modes in that order. And I know a lot of trip planners claim that they have maintained the same order, but a lot of them address me as soon as possible to something they will depend money for. This trip, the results are delivered to the MaaS service provider, and they can finally contact indirectly or directly the transport operators to book something, and there are the technical standards again. What's the first idea in Norway? It's done already, and a lot of other member states in Europe, it isn't yet done, is that the national access point is connected somehow to the trip planner. So that means if someone adds their data sets, their nettext files or whatever to the national access point, it should be used by the trip planner directly. Yeah, and of course, the registration and the deliverance of the data are 2 different aspects. data can be obtained directly from the transport operators or maybe from the national access point. It can be done on a way, and that's partly the connection between the European mobility data spaces. And there are numerous ones. There's mobility data space in Germany, but you have the new upcoming project, that's the European mobility data space. They actually safeguard your data. You're going to get data if you're a trip planner, and the one you're going to request it is knowing you are it that is going to request it. That's part of the data space puzzle. But nevertheless, these data spaces need kind of registration of the participants, and those things are technical. Yep. But there should be a connection between the national access points and those mobility data spaces as well. But there's a connection between them. So there's not only deliverance of data, but also the registration of participants. The data spaces itself. This is a picture from Aisha, also known to Ferdinand. I would be surprised if he's going to address something like this as well. The general idea of these data spaces is that there are numerous data spaces, but we need something that can guarantee that an actor in one of these data spaces has an identifier. No, for instance, I compare it often with countries and regions and municipalities. Within the municipalities, there are actors. And I'm an inhabitant of the Benelux, and so even in here that I live in the city, it's all registered in here, and I can go to Denmark and identify myself here in the city of Copenhagen. Hey, I'm from the Netherlands, and you can look at that in there because you trust this data space. It's more or less similar. You can identify yourself as an actor in any data space, and that's the general idea and of also the iShare Foundation. iShare Foundation is something that's not but the iShare Foundation actually wants to create a bridge between all the current data spaces as well. So the current MDS in Germany, but also the other ones, GaiaX, IonaX, whatever. There are quite a few ones. They want to, let them apply the same rules they have, so that would be able to make someone travel, maybe in the future, using data spaces from Norway all the way to Italy or something else. And that's something I want to address here as well. Here in the Nordics, as Søren already said, you're equipped. You have digital means. You have probably funding for all the innovations you're doing, but don't lose the rest of Europe. Don't create a new border, because when you're drawing a new border around the Nordics, you have again a border to cross. And data space could be one of the means that could be helping us together. Okay. Next point I want to address is the federated national access points. In my opinion, all the national access points throughout Europe should be standardized as well. For that would mean that you could look for something. Maybe I'm Antwerp and I want to have someone to travel to Rome. I don't care. The Antwerp should be able to contact the access point with specific questions. For instance, who is acting in Rome? Who can deliver me the last mile? Is there a route planner in Rome? And then the national access point should rely the question to the Italian one. He deliver the answer. This way of working is not addressed currently. This is a gap. I know there are discussions about a European access point where all the data sets from all Europe should be carried. I think it's not wise. It would be too big, and it could serve a purpose then it would be for cross-border. For instance, the ferries or the trains that are cross-border, the European access point could be helpful. This is the one, another gap, and I was very pleased that Søren addressed it already a bit. It's about, okay, we have found each other. A national access point, Entour or a WIM or what else wants to contact the transport operator in Rome. We don't have a legal foundation. We're not able to book directly because we're not trusting each other. And therefore we have in the Netherlands set up a model contract. It's called Open Wheels. And several parties are using it right now, even Dutch Republic throughout Europe. But what's the practice? It's a standard product, and there are always things that you're not completely satisfied with. You have to adjust things. And all these adjustments and the attachments that are applied to the open model the open model contract, we are actually looking at to put them together in a library. So it can be usable for everyone, but it's standardized. So all these parts, the additionals and these modifications are legally tested before they are in the library. So what would be the case if I have a new operator, bike operator, I can pick a contract and put on out of this library all the different parts to make my contract that suits me. But it's standardized, but not too rigid. There's flexibility. This way of working can be done. We have already set it up more or less with an Austrian organization about car sharing. And we even managed to make it technically possible to skip this one, to fill in all the details and sign it using SSI techniques. So you can also verify that it's a contract that is signed by the two parties, and it's a legal base for booking. So if you create a booking later on, as the MaaS, throughout Europe, you could use to these to refer to the bookings to this contract. Oh, if you want. Last slide. Development I see right now happening is the OGP. That's coming up a little bit more. It's been done. I think Trina will be addressing this. Maybe the same picture.
Yeah, I will have the same picture.
Yeah, okay. I'm not going to that. I'm going to focus on the. I'm going on to focus on the right one. An idea what I actually discussed with Sami. I guess I have seen him in the participants list as well. Had a few years ago already. How about if we take the OTP instance from Entour that can be reused in every country and put the OGP wrapper on top of it? So we have the OTP instance, and it has been done already in Italy. part2 has applied it, and as well the OTP setup is open source as the OGP wrapper is open source, only they're not the same version, and they have to be changed and modified to have a new working example. But that's something we're looking at for in the Netherlands, but we look for the ministry to get some money for that. And thirdly, and that's what you already have here in Norway, there in Norway, that the connection, the tight connection with the national access point should be there in the blood as well. But that means as well, the national access points should be standardized as well. And there we have a big issue. And that's something we're going to in the upcoming few months, years probably. And then for the rest of the OGP, I'll leave that to Katrina. So the last slide is actually who I am and why I gathered all this information. In the past few years, I have done quite a few things as well in the regulation part, the technical part. So if you have questions and or see things you think I can be helpful, just contact me. We'll arrange something. And I made it.
You have a lot of time still.
Still.
So
Okay.
you cannot leave it still here. So
Okay. Questions?
yes, thank you. Any comments or questions to Edwin now after his presentation or even online? Earlier, you had a lot of comments. Son?
Yeah, could you elaborate a little bit more on Tomp API, maybe Tomp API for dummies? What is it actually is going on? If I'm going to rent a car, what is Tomp API doing?
Okay, that's not in my presentation, but I can elaborate a little bit more about it. One thing I want to address is that the perspective I've heard of this morning and yesterday evening is that you're aiming to connect MaaS providers. And MaaS providers and national access points should work together. The Dutch approach is a little bit different because we actually look at it a little bit more fine-grained. Actually, we think the bricks are not the national access points and MaaS providers, but the transport operators. So a MaaS provider should be able to contact any transport operator. So the detail level is a little bit different than the perspective used here. But with that perspective in mind, we have developed the Tomp API, where transport operator has a uniform interface and supplying data to facilitate route planning. That's the first level. And that's more or less GBVAS compliant. And you know probably most of them GBVAS. And we're taking steps to still become compliant with them. So if they are changing things, we're adopting them as well. But that's an approach probably we'll have to leave in the future, but that's possible. That's the operating module, as we call it. The second one, and that's the most important one in my perspective, is the booking one. And that we have a few flavors in booking. You can use the planning kind of booking. So I want a bike for tomorrow, but you can also use it for the here and now. I see here a bike and I already have identified this bike. It's Donkey Republic's motorbike. I don't care, any identifier, and I can learn to book it because I'm right in front of it. So those two kinds of booking we support. And I know there's a lot of terminology that is frustrating because it's reservation, it's long-term rental. I don't care. We call it booking. It's just to create a booking for a specific amount of time. That we have set up. Again, two different ways. First one is the MaaS way, and that makes you are going to create a route planning, and for all the legs you will create the booking, and when everything is finalized, you have to commit it. Transactional way of booking. That's one way we have worked out, but we see nowadays that it's more and more not planning in advance because everything can change during your ride, but it's on the spot. So I'm going to travel and I'm traveling from here to anyway, Copenhagen.
Yeah, but
in Copenhagen Center, and at that spot, I decide what's here and what I'm going to take. There's a question coming up.
That's a question coming up. See, 100 meters from here.
Yep.
Hvor nu du kommer fra? Sjernau. Vi tager en Sjernau-bil. We have Sjernau cars here in, at the airport.
Yeah.
It's
You need to say what you're writing.
I'm writing Sjernau car.
Thank you, because it's not visible in the screen.
It's not even visible now. Let's see it about.
And now you can't read it. No, but it's just to so we have this here. We have a Sjernau car. The principle for a Sjernau car is you can order it some minutes. It's 20, 30, 35 minutes in advance. So I'm coming in from the airport.
Yeah.
I'm looking in my MaaS app.
Yeah, and
I see there's plenty of Sjernau. I just want one of them.
Yeah.
I'm pointed to it. Book it.
Yeah.
What does the Tomp API do for me in that MaaS app?
In the MaaS app, the MaaS app is going to call Sjernau.
Yeah.
And directly is going to book this specific asset if it's already directed, or say, no, I don't want a car with this license plate, but I want the car of this type. It's possible.
Yeah.
So you can book a time or a specific asset.
Yeah.
That's possible. And then the second step, and that's something that is neglected in most of the discussions, is that when you have booked something, you're not there. You must be able to open up the car. You must be able to travel, but that's the trip execution part. That's another, just a minute. The trip execution is a separate part from the booking one. So we have the booking part, we have the trip execution part where you can control actually the asset.
Mhm.
And you have support. So when you're traveling and you have a flat tire with your car, you have to inform Share Now, hey, I'm standing here and here, please help me out. And that's something the Tomp API facilitates as well. And the last one is actually supporting payments. So we actually are able to report what you have used as a Share Now. And if you are Entour and you're using Share Now, you're able to call Share Now what you have delivered to me, so I can make it transport the money for you.
Yeah.
And there are a few things happening right now, and then I'm just referring to Reese. Payment service providers nowadays are entering the scene pretty hard. The MaaS Alliance is in the last few months had a few new members. They were all in the payment or book MaaS. So they are seeing MaaS coming up right now.
Yeah, my reflections on what we're listening to today is the following. There's a big difference between buying a train ticket and renting a car. So I'm not even at the point where you're actually allowed to book a car yet, because we have a legal requirement in Denmark to know that you have a valid driver's license.
Yeah.
And at all times, we are by law required to know who's driving the car. And so my interest is that part.
Okay.
The legal requirements, the validation of driver's license, the revalidation of driver's license after a while. Right now, we're doing it within a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm.
We're asking our users to revalidate the license.
Yeah, it's still valid.
Could you
just state your name and
Sure. My
rank?
name is Anders from Scherner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Share Now is a
Free floating car share.
I know from the Netherlands. Thank you. But the Tomp API facilitates in this scenario. It allows booking, and you can deliver personal information like your driver's license. And there I have to make a remark that hasn't been addressed in this discussion. Because AEDAS 2.0 is coming up. I don't know if you're aware of this legislation, but every European citizen should be able to use a digital wallet within a few years. I think officially the law had to be formed this year, but it probably will be 2025. But on all national member states, there are already initiatives to facilitate this and find out how it works. And therefore, this passing of the driver license is actually in scope of AEDAS 2.0. And we know how to tackle this one, but we're trying to set up a project to get a pilot with the city of Amsterdam, how to apply this. But it can be done in the Tomp API. You can, during the booking part, you can demand that the driver license has to be delivered, and you can validate it later on. But if AEDAS 2.0 is going to be active, they probably will also use verifiable credentials. That's how it's technical stuff. So you can verify it on the spot. You don't have to call, for instance, a national institute for, is this still a valid driver license? You have already the technical deliverance that it's already validated. So it makes it easier, but it's a lot of technical stuff. But
just curiosity, are you going with Tomp API anywhere? You know?
Not to my knowledge, no.
I know Green Mobility is, I know Donkey Republic is.
Yeah. I'm not in the technical part of our setup. So
but we definitely know that there are at least 2 Danish outfits that are comfortable using the Tomp API, so there must be something there.
I wouldn't know.
No, okay.
Welcome.
Okay. Excellent. Let's give it a big applause. We will take a short break in this room and reconvene at, where's your nice coffee slide? There. Look at that. So 11:30, which is 5 minutes more, actually, because we used some in the discussion. So get them time. See you soon at 11. So we're back. It's a bit difficult keeping track of both online and on site, but we're doing our best. I will, without much ado, continue giving you the word onwards. But again, if you have any questions, you're quite good at using the chat. I think you can be a little bit more active, and that's great. Ferdinand, can I give the word to you, please? And big applause to Ferdinand. And this one should work again. Yeah. Yes, we hope.
Shall we test it?
Yes.
Right.
The expert is here.
This one? Bring in, yeah,
Hang on.
Bring in the expert.
but yeah, good. I'm back. Good. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. For those who are unacquainted with my name, I've been working in the field of mobility for quite a few years. I think I first met up with the Odin NOMAD project in Copenhagen, in the city, actually, a few years ago. And then still friends of Kutri and others were there. Sadly missed at this point, but also doing great work elsewhere, so that's good. So also having been part of the MaaS Alliance for their technical standardization and ticketing workshops, I understood that MaaS was not going anywhere unless we were bringing in the actual operators and authorities. This also had to do with the fact that I was honored to lead a project in the Benelux, which had to do with cross-border ticketing, where solutions like roaming were also part of the process. And we wanted to see how these platforms interact, but also how they create issues. And one of the main issues that they create have to do with GDPR and data governance. And this is, in my personal, vendetta, I think, for the past 3 years has become a project which I'm currently finishing off. We just delivered all the hardware and software for Horizon 2020 project. And I'll try to place this in the context of the data spaces I just heard our friend about. So mainly GDPR principles, but I'll keep it short here. We've heard about these. What's most important is how we actually use the data. What's the purpose of it, and what is the interaction? How do we transgress the border of privacy with the individual? I'll leave these slides with you. There's a lot of text here, but when we talk MaaS, when we talk Netflix, when we talk Amazon, when we talk booking, right? The key principle is that the user gives consent, the data subject. That means goodbye, all my data, it's yours, all right? Fuck me, all right, let's go. On the other side, you can imagine that there's different rules put in place which allow for different use of data. No, the data is mine, but you can use it for. And a ticket is such an example. Even the planning of a ticket or a booking or a fare calculation, right, is part of such a contract. It's covered by Article B. For instance, under Article C, in order to be compliant with the legal obligations, such as identifying myself for cross-border travel with my first and my last name, it's under C. Wow, there's actually, is this the GDPR? Is this what it is about? This is really cool, right? It's already in place. And then finally, if an authority wants to understand how public space is being used or public money is being spent, right, under the PSOs and even within implementation in national regulations, that processing would be lawful. So we don't have to give away that information, which is practically ours. Then into the DGA, the most important two are these two, right? So the transparency, the purpose of the data use, and the conditions of storage. And hello, no re-identification, right? This is nice because that means that I can be whoever I want to be, right? And this is interesting because
although you all saw my name, although you all have an image of me, all your images differ, right? So the one human being would spot the fact that I'm wearing a white shirt, the other that I'm wearing glasses, because it has to do with your own reference framework. So in the minds of all of you, I am different. And when we look at the Web 2.0 with the digital platform in the middle, which is one of the false assumptions of the MDMS, right, is that there is a cut between the actual service operators like mobility, healthcare, skills, or leisure providers, and the consumer. The consumer is not even in that relationship anymore. Why? Because a platform came in between, gave the user some kind of an account or media, which we see in ticketing. And on the other side, they hold the transactions that you hardly can get out of them in order to reuse for your own benefits. So these are the thresholds and issues we want to tackle in order to face MaaS. Web 3.0 and DGA compliance means that, as already pointed out by Edwin, as an individual, I can have control over my personal data. Whether that's my driver's license being held by the National Driving License Authority, whether that's my bank account and my token of my bank held by maybe a MasterCard or by my personal bank ING, or whether that's my travel pass from Reisekaart, right? I could get back that information. I'll touch upon that later on as well. But the interesting thing is that as an individual, for each interaction, whether it's with a third party, with the actual provider of the services, or with the platform, I have different relationships, right? On the one count, I am the consumer. On the other one, I am the customer. On the third one, I am the user. Hello, ISO 24014-1. Right? Anyone familiar with this picture? You are, yes, for sure. So sorry about some of the liaisons. I had to turn this from Keynote into PowerPoint, and well, still some issues there. So the promise of international fare management and its interoperability is based upon the fact that if you both do the same, literally the same, then you're interoperable. But we all know that building any solution takes people. People have different images of the solution, of the language, of the interaction. So no platform anywhere is the same. So that means that we have to look for something else if we want to make this work. On the other hand, if we were talking about DGA and GDPR compliance, I am not my media, right? And I'm certainly not one medium. I am not my bank pass or bank card if I'm traveling in the Netherlands. I am me, right? You use an identifier to do that. But combining my identity of a passenger going from point A to B, leaving privacy sensitive data, right, in a geospatial mode, and the fact that I am an individual with a name, address, etc., should not be in the same place, right? They're two separate things. So the identity provider and the account provider, as we saw in the first picture, need to have a different role. Coming back to MaaS, right? So I really like the concept of the transport operator and the MaaS provider, right? So the mobility, the actual physical mobility service provider, and a platform which provides digital services. Cut out ticketing and cut out planning and navigation, and you've got a ticketing app, right? So maybe let's create simplicity. So now I'll take you down the road of the data spaces, where the International Data Spaces Association took care of delivering an architecture which actually does a few things. It looks at the vocabulary, which was discussed this morning, right? How to communicate, what are the semantics, where can we find the data, how can we interact? It requires identities, like we spoke of this morning with iShare, right? How can I identify my counterpart? How can I call Søren in Denmark? because he has one fixed mobile number, right? Which I know. And this is why even when Søren calls me and he's in my address list, I know it's him when he's calling me. Wow, magic, right? That has to do with identification. On the other side, they're talking about app stores, which is a general facility, and clearinghouses. Clearinghouses, they're still a bit unsure of. And this has to do with other newfound, interesting perspectives, right, along the way. Because with every step we take into the future, we learn new things. So what was the objective of governments, right, with the NAPCOR project is to enable the mobility service providers and the platform digital service providers to be interacting with one another. So one of the projects there was about vocabulary and discoverability, which also has to do with the data for PT, but you can also think about vocabulary being NetX, under transmodel, etc. And then you have an organization who calls itself Gaia X. And the interesting is Gaia X is subwater, right? We're talking hardware here. How do mainframes, right, servers communicate in between them? So it's about security and scalability. But they actually use the concept of data spaces to give themselves a home, right? Because if you're just talking about this on a stage, most authorities would be out in 3 seconds. Then there's a project called iShare, which was already mentioned by Edwin, and it has to do with the authorization, and even if you wanted to, or the identification, even if you want to, the authorization management of interchanging information. Right? So I know that for a fact that Søren, all right, likes to have a small beer after work. Why? Because I was in his vicinity, and that left him, right, to authorize me to observe him, and this is why I know that, right? So if we're talking two systems to each other in a distance, we need to know who's knocking on whose door, right? And do you know each other in order to exchange information? So if you look at how that works, is that for the interoperability and connectivity, you don't connect the platforms anymore because that's the operations inside, but you start to create context brokers. Right? This is in parallel with the Payment Service Directive. So in Payment Service Directives, you have an offcut of the operations, which is actually placed in a temp cage or however you want to frame it. And organizations like Fireware, Eclipse, under standards of ETSI, are creating standards in this field, right, of exchange, creating this interoperability, connectivity. The project I'm working on is called Fair Sphere, and it has to do with two things: with output-driven many-to-many collaboration, right, and it has also to do with DGA and GDPR compliance, which I will touch upon in a few clicks. So what we do is we don't see them as being connected. Right? We're not related here to each other. We're related to the fact that we're all part of the MaaS Conclave. Right? I'm not even related to my wife. Right? We're both related to the relationship we call a relationship. Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Right? So we can connect and exchange information, right, with a multitude of organizations, which includes a personal account and media holder as a part of the platform. So before we go to AIDAS and externalizing our personal wallet somewhere, you can imagine that we are still part of the platform. Why not reuse that information? It's already there. Right? You just want to know who's going to use it for what, where, and when. So around the individual, you can imagine that there's a personal data intermediary, which relates to work being done by my data, but far more important, the DGA, the recognized data intermediary. That means a trusted stamp given out by the European Union that your data is safe there, it's only being used for those things that you need. Another part being the transaction intermediary. Why? Because I don't want my personal data and everything I do in my life to be in the same space. Right? That puts all my life out there if a breach is being found, and breaches are being found every day. This also relates to, right, I'm taking a parallel to the recognized data altruism organizations. Whilst the individual is not seen as that, I can contribute my personal data to my neighbors, to my employer, to the authority in order to facilitate improvements, right, for analysis and things like that. And here the second part comes into play, where the transaction broker is actually facilitating DGA and GDPR compliance. This means that there's no longer a platform between my information and the mobility or service provider. I can also interact with them. Wow, this is interesting. More and more to come. I'll touch upon this one later on because I mixed around the slides a bit, but imagine that this works, right? I can identify myself or pay indifferently for the field of, oh, sorry about that, for the field of mobility, for the field of healthcare, or even work or skills. I'm in control of my data, interacting with whomever I want. How about for that, for creating a level playing field? So stay away from 6.1a, consent, right? Do not consent. Don't give it all away, right? Maintain control, and as an authority, be aware that if you allow organizations to have that consent button, right, you are actually throwing away a lot of valuable data of your citizens. So instructions are there to be made. Okay, so let's continue. The transaction broker one-on-one real quickly, because I think I'm running out of time. Centralize the control over my information. I want to be interactive, whether that's in an interface in the future or currently reusing my information in any, let's say, Rise card, or let's say TransLink systems operating the Dutch OV card. I want to have my information brought back to me. Should I be dependent on a platform for parts of it, the details, but not for the fact that I interacted with others? So if I imagine a platform, a MaaS platform, or a ticketing platform to be the transaction intermediary, they will collect the actual fares and trips which are facilitated by the physical service provider and will retrieve the information that they need from me, separately from payment and separately from the actual service. So I need to specify in which transaction process an activity is taking place where they can have access to a specific credential, right? Isn't that a lot of work? Yeah, first time round, right? But imagine the freedom you'll be gaining. So what happens? FareSpare is only focusing on the value exchange. That means that for my payment of the fare, I get entitlements to the service, right? Are these familiar words for everyone? Yeah. So that means that if the transaction is going to be communicated, we need to know which stakeholders can access that information. And we have two types of transaction processes. One is prepaid and the other one is postpaid. And the only difference is here is the payment execution before the service authorization and execution, or does it come afterwards? And afterwards has a few benefits, right? I can actually calculate the fare of the trip that was made. But how many times do I not know in advance where I'm going to travel? Right? Which is an interesting question. So everyone who should be involved, right, can retrieve or is informed of the fact that this transaction is taking place. That means that I just get an alarm bell. Hey, you're in a transaction now. So as an operator, I'm informed by the ticketing or MaaS platform, this is coming your way, right? Someone agreed to this. That means that, what is this? They can get the details from the transaction intermediary, as can I as the passenger. So where's the ticket now? Anyone?
I have lost my ticket.
Where is the information of the ticket, Marco? It's both with the transport operator as it is with the passenger.
Isn't it that today?
In a ticketing platform, I only get a ticket, right? The inspection device is offered by the ticketing platform to the transport operator in order to validate it. But we'll go on. I'll make it interesting for you. An acquiring bank is an organization that actually retrieves the funds, right, of an issuing bank held by a customer. So that means that whether the acquiring bank is part of the transport operator or whether it's part of the ticketing or MaaS platform, right, I only have to pay once. They can decide who will collect the money, right, and clear that. That's not up to me. The only thing that they want to need to know is which bank account did I select in order to pay for this trip. Which could be one which I share with my family, one which is only mine, one which is registered to my place of work. And in retrieving, they can also connect to the personal account or media holder saying, okay, can we actually, you being the bank, right? Can we actually withdraw that amount? Yes, you can. Okay, so I've authorized my payment. That means that upon doing that, everyone's informed again. The same goes for the payment execution, right? Contact, can I have the money? Yes, you can. Transfers being made. Everyone's informed. So now if we come to inspection, what does the transport operator need to know? The fact that the ticket has been prepaid. It already knows the details. So if I exchange that information based on a QR code, or I'm using any card I want to connect to that, it's open. And whether I'm inspected by a physical service provider or transaction intermediary or by gates or by anything. The simplicity is in the fact that it's only one transaction. And that leads me to remark on your suggestion this morning that within IATA, I only have one ticket that supports me through multiple steps. That's not entirely true. You have multiple tickets, but they're connected under one booking ID. And that booking ID allows you to go through all the steps.
In one payment.
In one payment. So you can still do this. The question is, would you want to? Because most of us are familiar with public transport. They not always run on time. So if I miss one connection, there's a good guess that I'll need to rebook and rebook and rebook. And we need to pay back, re-clear, right? So my suggestion would be in that case, start to book whenever you have a decent ETA, which will allow you to be on time for the next step. Again, being informed. And finally, inspection. All right. Do you have a first and last name? Yes, I do. You can collect it over there, or you can even collect it from my TransLink systems environment, where they already have this. And again, so if you look at the bottom, and I'll go back a bit, which is fun. Da-da-da. You see nothing. Here we go. All right. We're in a movie now. Things are happening. All right. This is a comic, but a really interesting one, because every step of the way, I've got control over my information, know who needs it, for what reason, for which purpose. Wow, we're compliant and we created a level playing field. How cool is that? And I can use it in one domain, I can use it in another domain, but then this happens. This was our discussion on LinkedIn this week. So if you want to have different MaaS operators in different regions, which have to interconnect again to different regions, it's going to look like this spaghetti soup. So if you were to rearrange that, you could also make it look like this. Right? which is quite a lot more organized. And I can even reuse, for instance, my healthcare information, right, to be used as a fare reduction in the mobility domain, right? Because in the end, I'm in control of this information. So concluding, no, that's it. It's concluded. No more slides. I'm done. So I hope that the takeaway that you can take from this is that although the platform was still in our minds as being the central point of interaction, it isn't. And how do we want to overcome that within data spaces? It means that we need to know to whom we're talking, that we have a similar language, not even the same, but similar. Sometimes same helps when you're doing profiles. But even in the fact of the case of ticketing, where all the platforms and technologies are different, right? The northern hemisphere of Europe mostly works with MyFare, right? The southern hemisphere with Calypso. Now we're bringing EMV in, right? Current state, I'm not happy with EMV. Why? Because it's not GDPR compliant, right? But if they were to use it in such a fashion, it'll be okay, right? I've got the choice to identify myself twice with the same medium. But I can also choose to use another thing or just use a QR code, which I really like in the flight industry, right? Why make it more complicated? So the issue is how can we create simplicity in a world which is now seemingly becoming more and more difficult? And this is also what organizations like STA and UITP are looking into. And this is why I went into the dark side in order to support them to create the light that we have to end up in some kind of galaxy where we can travel free. Because as long as I've got enough money on my account, I can travel anywhere, identifying myself with anything. And that for me is the definition of mobility as a service. Yeah, thanks.
From the web saying blockchain comes to mind. You want to comment?
Very good. Yes, that's a smart individual. So actually within the FairSphere solution, we've used blockchain in order to ensure that not the details, but the facts of the state of play are communicated to everyone. And that's, if I'm talking smart contracts, it's not about any legal aspects, it's about data processing, which has come about of consensus or of common exchanges. So that means that the whole data processing of who gets access to which information is organized in a smart contract, which people can read or can have read. And it allows to understand that the data has been processed in a rightful fashion. So no tokens, no money going over the blockchain, right?
Okay.
Simple means of trust and provenance. Yes.
Yeah, you might have answered that with blockchain, but I mean, this is a technical architecture, so but the governance architecture, it always ends up with trust and the different domains. But there's a top trust. Who is that? Do you have a notion? Is that EU? Is that national? Or who is issuing the top trust of each domain that should be trusted?
But this is an interesting question. And if you were to ask me, you can do a lot of trust in your architecture, right? Which can include provenance. So who actually picked up my information, when. You can do it by pre-authorizing it, right? Who can access my information in the near future? For instance, for inspection of my cross-border train trip. So this creates a sense of trust. In the end, I think it's a combination of these solutions that will allow that. And most fixed, I think, is replacing the trust back in the traceability and the transparency. So for me, governance with old men hanging over papers saying, we trust this, we trust that, doesn't work for me. If I see that something is transparent, I know how it works, or someone can explain me how it works, and there are no different exit routes, I'm very happy. So transparency is key.
There's a similar initiative some years ago in the maritime sector, where exactly this federate the different trusts.
By MaaS.
Who's trusting the trustees? So
Yeah, but that was the problem. So MaaS actually offered that platform.
not much.
I was not MaaS.
But it actually hasn't gone through because that central entity who is validating, who's issuing trust through the trustees, very hard to agree upon in the maritime sector. So
we're bringing it back to individual. No. So we're bringing it back to individual relationships, which is far more powerful than one centralized one.
Yeah.
The only dissemination to multiple actors is thus done based on blockchain and the trust of the smart contract.
Blockchain perhaps is that.
And it shouldn't be used for anything else, I guess, but that's my personal opinion.
Excellent. A big applause to Ferdinand. Karina, the stage is yours before lunch. And after that, we will have lunch downstairs, right, Inge? Yes, so we will just go down the stairs and the lunch is served in the restaurant. And I will put the webinar on pause for the guys online. But first, Katarina, the stage is yours.
Thank you. I'm the happy person that is between you and your lunch. I'm sorry for that. Nevertheless, I hope I can share with you some of our learnings. Let's see. It works for me. My name is Katharina Helpert. I'm coming from AustriaTech. For those of you who don't know the organization, it's more or less 100% subsidiary of the Austrian Ministry of Transport. So we are working directly for the ministry in different aspects of mobility. On the one hand, supporting them with the strategic part, but we are as well in many international projects, trying to bring our know-how to international projects or to use the project as well for harmonization, standardization, European-wide. So we are quite in a lot of sectors in the mobility. And so you probably met one of my around 80 colleagues, maybe in the past somewhere. So thank you for having me here. For me, it's funny to be most probably the person from the south in a room full of people. Normally in Austria, this does not happen. So my presentation today is more or less twofold. On the one hand, I was asked to bring a little bit about our learnings from integrated travel information and integrated mobility services in Austria. And the other part, I'm looking a little bit across the borders. So what we're doing now with what we have within Austria when we go to the borders of the Alpine and of the Danube region. So let's start, because we are all hungry. So what you should know, today we heard a lot about MaaS, or how we call it in Austria. We are not used the term MaaS anymore because the ministry decided we're going more towards integrated mobility services, and they're not happy with the term of MaaS anymore because everybody has a different conception. What is MaaS? How can it interpret it? It's like the story of Ferdinand. If you look at him, everybody sees different, and the same it is for MaaS. So we call it now integrated mobility services, and we had this all there. But what you will mainly hear from me now is tackling this first part about the integrated travel information. So what we have in Austria is something you also have in some other countries. We have the so-called a nationwide travel and traffic information in Austria on a multimodal level for all combined by all federal states in Austria. And this is provided by the Traffic Information Austria Limited. And what is important to know that this is not our national access point. This is something that came up after long stories of the different public transport associations, public transport operators in Austria working together with the roadway operators and so on, deciding they want to go for a service that does not, an information service that does not end at the borders of the operators. And this is why VAO was founded. And in principle, it's providing multimodal data. So there is public transport routing, there is some individual transport routing, there are car sharing in there, bike sharing. So there are huge different options, timetable, real-time data, incident messages. So this is more or less our basis we have in Austria. But the way to this was quite a hard one, and it was quite a long one, because when I think it was about 15 years ago when it started that we said, okay, we want transport and traffic graph for all over Austria, because we had this, you know, this on the level of the different federal countries in Austria, but this was stopping, and they decided, the federal countries, to work together to come up with a combined rail and road infrastructure network graph. This is the graph integration platform. And this is still the basis for all the services we have in Austria, graph integration platform. And this was the first, I would say, some starting point that you see, okay, if we work together, we can create something that will have added value of all of us. And so the next part is, okay, we have the same problem with the travel information, because, you know, 10 years ago, it was like everywhere. You come at the cross of a federal country and yeah, you have to switch your app, your information, whatever. And what we now have in place, and this was also a long way with different projects to find a commitment, but we have a public transport data pool in Austria. There is a Transport Association Austria, which is a separate association that is owned by the different public transport authorities in Austria. And they provide together their data within one central data pool, which is also the basis for the multimodal journey planner, which is Travel Information Austria. And it's important to know the Transport Association Austria is still not the owner of the data. The ownership still relies with the transport information, but we have a data pool we can base on. And if we look again at the VAO, the Traffic Information Austria, it's important to understand that we not have one app in Austria. We have a variety of apps in Austria. What we provide there are white label services. So all the different public transport providers together with ASFINAG, the roadway operator, with our motorway company, with a little bit of share of the ministry, they say, okay, we want to make a company, a legal company that provides this, and Traffic Information Austria is in the share of 1/3 of ASFINAG, the roadway operator, 1/3 of the Federal Railways Austria, and 1/3 of the transport associations. Yeah, so we have all these players on board, and every player, every transport association has still its own app. It has still its own customer relation, but in principle, our basic data in the background is the same for all of you. This is not that you are obliged to use this. So there are some companies that say, okay, I just take the information, I make my own routing, I do some different kind of usability issues. That's all of them. This is as well not free of charge. Yeah? Nothing you need to use, but most of them are using them because they are part of the shareholder. This is something they're bringing in something and they're taking out something. And this is how it works. And this is also where, and I will refer to this later on, one of the services of Traffic Information Austria is also the OGP service. So all the information provided over an OGP passive interface. So what I would like to mention here, and I think this is important in today's discussion, is we have also the national access point in Austria, which is mobilitydata.at. And this is something that is managed and hosted by AustriaTech. This one department within AustriaTech is a neutral body. So this is not part of the VIO and other way around. It's two completely different organizations. And in Austria, the national access point is set up in a way where you have a centralized one-stop shop, but just to find the local service providers, that you see what data is existent and what are the use case conditions. So it's kind of a metadata platform. You can do some meta search. This is not a central data platform. In principle, it would be possible, but it's not how it does on the overall architecture and structure in Austria. So this is important to know. We have these white label services and we have the implementation of the ITS law. That's why Austria is maybe in some of the international discussions when it comes to the role of the NAPs and how we see it, a little bit different, because our starting point is different. Nevertheless, when we now look from this, okay, we have a quite good starting point for the travel information all across Austria. We still see there are some missing parts, so we do not have all the scooter providers, not all the ride shares, the on-demand transport. There's still a long way to go. But more or less, a lot of the Austrian stakeholders are aware, okay, there is something like Traffic Information Austria, and we can use them, and it makes sense to use that platform for any future services to build on. So there is still room for improvement, but and we still have, for the integrated mobility services, look towards also to improve it in regard of other modes or completing the information there. But it's a good starting point. We also know, okay, now this stops at the Austrian border, how to deal with that. And that's something where we come later on to the OGP topic. And we see on Austrian level, okay, we are now getting deeper and deeper into the discussion. We have now these integrated travel information. We know how to go with the travel information across borders. At least we have an idea. We have beta phases, but we still lacking out this part about payment and ticketing and booking. But how to integrate this into all of that? And just to spoiler you, we don't know yet. But what we are doing is we're learning a lot. So we had some major MaaS project, I would say integrated mobility project, if someone from the ministry is now following today. We had the SMILE project, which was already taking place in 2013 and 2015, so quite a long time ago. And this was for the first time in Austria, really coming together of a huge variety of our MaaS operators, I would say, those organizations who are part of the MaaS ecosystem in Austria, really trying out how does it work with also mobility packages. If you offer the users some kind of different mobility options to the tickets. And this was really important in Austrian level because it started off a lot of discussion. And out of the project, there are still some companies who started as a start-off and are now active implementing MaaS solutions on national Austrian level. And last year it was a domino project. And this was also a huge project which had on board all the major operators. It was some kind of, they call it a lighthouse project in Austria. And for me, some major takeouts were that they had 3 different pilot regions. And in the pilot regions, one major focus was, okay, we still have problems to reach the people that are not part of the public transport users or anybody users. Now, how can we attract people that are still in their car because they will not even do what Søren does and do this comparison because they will never have the idea to use something else. And we could gain some learnings, okay, how it could work, what kind of incentives could work, but we still see there are really the potential for the future. And there is still no good solutions to tackle these people. And the other one is a lot about ride sharing, which is part of the MaaS project, but I will not tackle too much now. So we learned a lot on those part. Okay, seeing we still have a lot of potential. We are still on the regional level, but what we also have in place in Austria is the so-called Klimaticket. And maybe you will reach this, and I will use the German word because this is also used in the international context. So in principle, what is in place, and this was implemented by the minister, which came from the Green Party, and this was one of the major things she stated during elections, that she will put this into place. And so this really came not out of the process in Austria. This was just set. It was a lot of discussion on a short time, but now we have more or less one ticket valued for all scheduled services, public rail, private rail, city, public transport for 1 year. You just pay a flat rate. And this changed a little bit, and we learned that this changed a little bit. Who might think about using public transport or rail? Because what we see a little bit is that people are now have something where they say, okay, I paid a climate ticket, but therefore maybe I will not use my car, otherwise it will not pay off for me. And so there's really some kind of effect with this, and it's still not potentially the optimal product, but it is something in place that will reach and help us for the future to going toward these integrated mobility services. And for sure, we have these framework in place. I will not tackle this too much, but this is important. What we now have in place since this year is the action plan for digital transformation in the mobility. And this is the action plan of the ministry that really covers concrete measures, how to take the next steps to bring digitalization as part of the mobility master plan into practice. And one part of this is really enabling integrated mobility services in Austria. So we are in a huge process now with a stakeholder process, with different working groups, planning to start off also national projects and initiatives to bring all these learnings, what we have now on national level together. But what we see is that we really need to tackle how we define our roles on national level in our ecosystem, who will fulfill which roles. We have at the moment more or less as first starting the discussion from the organizational point of view and not from the technical point of view. There are different solutions in place and things like the mobility data spaces that will support us in the discussion and ideas like Ferdinand presented us. There is this OGP learning I will tackle in a minute. And there is so much going on that we try to go the next steps in the near future. So what we definitely see, as I said, we need a common definition. We need a common understanding, because this is something we are hugely lacking in Austria. And we need more standardization and some kind of harmonized process, how we deal with the topic. And yeah, I will share with you how it's going on, if it's going towards standardization of products, minimum profile. Definitely minimum profiles on national level are something that are in hand now as one of the measures. So this is about the integrated part. And then I would like to tackle a little bit separate with our learnings. And you know now what is our starting point, why we were dealing with the OGP topic. And I think it is clear what we want. We want to travel seamless without thinking about any further things. And we did these traditional approaches. We did these traditional approaches with the data pooling, bringing all together in a central database. And we all know examples, and it works, and this is fine. And I think I would like to say to you that this has many advantages. Yeah. Which comes, you can easily link it technically, you have a good performance, you're in charge of all the different data there. So as Breden defined it before, this is a good solution in principle. We do it on national level as well. But, and this was especially the starting point when we started off, in principle, one of the reasons why OGP or linking of services started was a trust issue. It was the issue that I don't want to provide my data to major international platforms. I want to keep the sovereignty over my data. This was really the starting point. This was major discussed. I want to be the one that is in charge for the data interpretation, the data upgrade, not some company that is maybe abroad. And also we see that the scaling up needs very high resources. So it's good for a certain area or for country or for maybe the neighboring regions. But at some point you reach a level where it's really getting quite hard at the current level of technical level. And so the idea in principle was really to go from this one service all approach to the all serve one approach. There are different steps on this way, and we are still on this way, but in principle, this is the idea behind. And we started off with the topic in 2015. So this is almost 10 years ago. And then with 2017, with the delegated regulation, with the first MMTs, for the first time, the linking of service approach was mentioned. And at the same time, the SEN standard, the Public Transport OpenEye for distributed journey planning. So the reason why we call it OGP was finally published. And this was our starting point also for our project. So to avoid any misunderstanding, because if I say OGP, it's a little bit like all other things. People have some things in mind. In principle, OGP, as laid down in the technical, in the delegated regulation, is just a technical connection of systems linking distributed travel information services basing on existing services. So I'm not talking about creating any new journey planner services, but just linking the existing ones with all the data they have in it, using an API, a technical interface to exchange the routing results based on the OGP standards. And what you're doing is you're exchanging information, routing results for your lab and not data. And this in principle is what linking of service does mean, and going a little bit from a pooling approach to a more distributed and decentralized approach. The benefits, I think, are clear. I will just go through this. I think it's clear. You can use more or less in the final version your own app, as Søren described. You can use your own app in your own language. You travel across the borders. You don't need to think about changing the app. You, as a service provider, you keep the sovereignty over your data, but you still you improve the extension and the range of your service. And strengthen more or less your market position, because if it does not work, everyone uses the G platform. And that's in principle what we think about. And if you talk about that on a very, very meta level, what does OGP? OGP does split one request across the borders into different requests, into the different lags that is sent to the different local journey planners. You get the results together, you assemble it, and you get the final result. It's not that easy in real life on technical level, but in principle, this is the major concept. And what's important for me to cover is if you hear OGP and linking services, you can more or less use this as the same. The one is the approach, and the other one is more or less referring to a standard, but it's the same. What's important for me is that OGP is not about open data, and OGP is really based on contractual agreements. So depending on the national framework conditions, so what is going on, this is not for free. This is not open data. And I think this is a common misunderstanding also at European level, because this is different from country to country. Maybe if you go to Switzerland, Switzerland has a general policy that everything is open data, and they're setting up also their national access point based on OGP, and there is everything open. But this is not coming out of OGP itself. It's just the national strategy behind that. That we just mentioned it here because we had Netics, we had Siri, we had Transmodal, OGP is as well one part of the public transport family. And what is also maybe for those who are covered the first time, what the standard does, the OGP standard is defining a schema how to exchange the information. It's not giving an information on how the technical infrastructure look like. If this is a distributed or a centralized approach, this is not part of the standard, but it enables more decentralized and distributed concepts. But you don't need to do this. You can do this, and it still has some barriers, but in principle is enabled. What's important for you also maybe to understand or to know for those who are interested, there are main components that are interesting. The one is you really have your local journey planners, and these local journey planners need, on the one hand, some kind of OGP interfaces, these standardized interfaces, and you need the exchange points. The exchange point is also where the devil lies in the details. So this is something where when you're a researcher or a technician, this is something where you can really dive deep into this and this. However, and on the other part, you really have these active system part. They don't need to be just one active system. There could be more active system. Every system could be an active system. The only difference is you have some distribution logic, you have some algorithm there to assemble the different routing results you get. So it's even more complicated. And this is also normally your entrance for the end user applications. So I will hop over this. Just a story going back. This is just an example how maybe an OGP ecosystem look like. So would be happy to discuss more in detail, but this is not the frame for it, I think, today. So what we had, we really started off with the proof of concept in the Linking Danube project, where we really tried this into practice. And we're going on with the picture we have seen already today. So maybe to mention it, in Germany and the Nordic countries, there's the U-Spirit project in place where we are continuous exchange. We are also tried to formulate our profiles in a way that they're compatible. And for these are the projects where we also were actively involved. The one is in the Danube region, because due to the situation in Austria, we are in the central of Europe. We are involved in some kind of both regions. And the one in Switzerland, which was the Linking Alps project. So what we did in Linking Alps project was not only to set up really a technical architecture, we also made some organizational processes. We developed an OGP profile for Linking Alps. Why an OGP profile? I think Ferdinand mentioned this before. Is the other way around. Normally, if you have a standard, this does not mean everybody implements it the same way. Normally, you have a lot, you can call it spaces, dialects, whatever. If you have a standard, everybody will interpret it and implement it in a different way. So what we're doing, we're taking a subset and making up some kind of a profile that these different kind of implementations fit together. And this is something what we're also trying to harmonize with other OGP initiatives. So next to organizational architecture and technical architecture, framework structure, we also were building up really how all these kind of processes can work. And at the moment, we are testing this in a beta phase. So the official project is over. We're currently doing load tests, performance tests, user tests, and hopefully by May 2024, you can be an active user of the operational OGP service in the Alpine region. And yeah, so what we're learning from this. This was just for you to understand where we are going and why it's going. What we have seen from them is really these decentralized approaches are some kind of future to the future collaboration and how we work. I meant this before because we had these trust issues and there are these central approaches. But I think for the future, we have to think a little bit about decentralizing what we're doing. Collaborating in a decentralized way. And OGP could be one part of this. We see that these technical aspects and the architecture and how it works, where we really like to dive deep, always need to go hand in hand with the organizational architecture. We see now in the beta phase and the ending, the business models and how we collaborate, how do the service level agreements are really the critical part where we make now a lot of learnings, how it could work with our different framework conditions, because this is what happens. We have systems in place with different framework conditions. So this is of eager relevance. You really have to think about all these organizational processes. They have a huge relevance for the future. So this is maybe, and this fits, I think, very well to some others, the stakeholder and what the roles of the stakeholder and who fulfills this. It's so important. I just, can emphasize. You need to collaborate in a new way if you want to do some innovation, because this covers a variety of services that is also operational. And you always have to embed this into the appropriate policy and governance. And that's why it's important also to discuss it on European level, because otherwise you will maybe run out of your strength to put this into practice. So we also see there needs to be more standardization and harmonization across Europe, also on different approaches. For sure, what we do is a profile harmonization across Europe in this OGP sector. But what I also see is to put the different parts of the puzzles together. And I also see that OGP is part of this. It's no silver bullet solutions. There are many problems we need to solve on technical and organizational level, like in every approach else. But I think these decentralized approaches and how to work together in a decentralized way and what we learn about how OGP works can be one important part of the puzzle and should now in the next steps be fit together with the other concept, taking benefits of the centralized approaches, how we can do things centralized, how can we do things decentralized, and maybe to really make also integrated mobility work better. So, yeah, this is more or less my ending. It's a short advertisement from my side. If you're more interested into OGP, we have in Vienna an international event on the 18th of October. So you're kindly invited really to dive deeper into OGP business models, about the new OGP 2.0 standard, which will also tackle a little bit more booking and payment, which is not involved so far. Søren will support us there in one panel. Happy to see you there. So would be happy if we see you there. I still see many steps to go. But it's important to start going. Otherwise, we will never reach anywhere. So let's keep in touch. Thank you. Sorry for being before your lunch. Hope you could take something and thank you.
Thank you so much, Katarina.
Thank you.
Sorry. Any questions or any comments?
Yes.
Okay, very good, Søren.
I have
Stay
one.
up here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You say that there are some that you would not trust your data. How do you define a party that you do not trust your data, or transport data?
We trust our data, but they do not trust third-party organizations providing their data being in charge for the updates.
Being in charge of
doing updates, maintenance,
no, of course, but I guess that's part of the MMTIS regulation, that it's the source who has the control of the data. it's the source who has the responsibility of the data. The users can only use it, they cannot modify it.
They cannot modify it, but it's still in the past. There were experience, at least with regular updates that were not done. Yeah, this was just a bit experience in the past. That's why it was already 10 years ago, more or less on national political level, a decision that the public transport operators want to provide high quality travel information by themselves and not more or less leaving this open to a market.
Yeah, but that's understood, but that's the whole intention of the MMCIS regulation. That is to take that blockade away. Because the whole idea of that regulation is to ensure that all data that you have on static and dynamic data within an organization is shared at the same time and moment with the rest of the world through the national access point in open data. That is
not how interpreted in Austria. It is a source where you find it and you can make it more easily available under the same conditions. That's how we interpreted it, because this was still in the past a problem, but it's not to provide it over open data over the next national access point for the whole world. So far, this is not how this is done and understood on national level.
But that's a violation.
That's a very good conversation continuing for lunch. Any other questions? If not, we thank you, Katarina, for your time. A big applause again. Online, and we will go for lunch, and we will reconvene at past. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch. Yeah. What we do is for sure.